while everyone around you is explaining why they can't. You can be building the mental strength that makes you unstoppable. That's the difference between those who rise and those who stay stuck. It's not about talent. It's not about luck. It's not about perfect conditions. It's about one simple choice. Do you spend your energy making excuses or building strength? Because you can't do both. Every day, you're surrounded by people who have a reason for everything. Why they can't start. Why they can't finish. Why they can't change. Why they can't grow. And while they're busy explaining their limitations, you have a choice. You can join the excuse parade, or you can use their weakness as your training ground. You can let their complaints drag you down, or you can let their negativity remind you exactly who you don't want to become. Mental strength isn't something you're born with. It's something you build day by day, choice by choice. Excuse avoided by excuse avoided. And the beautiful thing is, while others are wasting their energy on explanations, you're investing yours in becoming someone who doesn't need to explain, someone who just gets it done, someone who finds a way when others find reasons why not. This isn't about being perfect. This isn't about never feeling doubt or fear. This is about training your mind to push through anyway. This is about building the kind of mental muscle that doesn't break under pressure. This is about becoming the person who rises when others fall, who moves when others freeze, who finds solutions when others find problems. The world doesn't need another person making excuses. The world needs people with mental strength, people who can handle pressure, people who don't crumble when things get hard, people who don't need perfect conditions to perform. That's what this is about. Building that strength while everyone else is busy explaining why they don't have it. Chapter 1. Recognize that every excuse you make weakens your mind. Every excuse you make is a choice to protect your comfort instead of building your strength, a choice to stay where you are instead of growing, a choice to remain weak instead of becoming powerful. And the more excuses you make, the weaker your mind becomes. Not because you're incapable, but because you're training yourself to find reasons why things won't work instead of ways to make them work. Your brain is always learning, always adapting, always getting stronger at whatever you practice most. If you practice making excuses, you get better at making excuses. Your mind becomes an excuse-generating machine. It starts looking for problems before solutions. It starts finding reasons to quit before reasons to continue. It becomes weak because that's what you've trained it to become. But here's what most people don't understand. Every excuse is actually an opportunity to choose strength over weakness, an opportunity to build mental muscle instead of mental fat, an opportunity to prove to yourself that you're not controlled by circumstances, but by choices. And the moment you start refusing your own excuses, something powerful happens. Your mind starts getting stronger. Think about the excuses you made this week. I don't have time. I'm too tired. It's too hard. I'm not ready. I'll start tomorrow. I don't know how. I'm not good enough. These aren't facts. These are choices. Choices to stay weak instead of getting strong. Choices to avoid discomfort instead of embracing growth. Choices to remain small instead of becoming powerful. The truth is, you always have time for what you prioritize. You always have energy for what you value. You're always ready to do what you're committed to doing. And you're always good enough to start where you are and improve from there. But if you keep telling yourself otherwise, you'll stay exactly where you are. Your mind will adapt to weakness instead of strength. Every excuse you refuse makes you stronger. Every reason you reject builds resilience. Every justification you ignore increases your capacity to handle pressure. Because now, your mind is learning a different pattern. Instead of looking for ways out, it starts looking for ways through. Instead of finding problems, it starts finding solutions. Instead of creating barriers, it starts breaking them down. This is how mental strength is built. Not through motivation, not through inspiration, through the daily practice of refusing to let your mind take the easy way out, through the consistent choice to face reality instead of hiding behind explanations, through the commitment to growth even when growth is uncomfortable. Most people live their entire lives at the mercy of their excuses. They let their reasons control their results. They let their explanations determine their future. They become prisoners of their own justifications. But you don't have to live that way. You can choose to build strength instead of excuses. You can choose to develop power instead of problems. It starts with awareness. Start paying attention to the excuses you make. Write them down if you have to. Notice how often you explain away your lack of progress. Notice how quickly you justify staying comfortable. Notice how easily you let yourself off the hook. Because you can't change what you don't acknowledge. You can't fix what you won't face. Then comes the discipline. The discipline to catch yourself making an excuse and choose differently. The discipline to feel the urge to quit and push through anyway. The discipline to hear your mind offering you an easy way out and taking the hard way instead. This isn't about perfection. You'll still feel the pull of excuses, but now you'll recognize them for what they are. Training opportunities. Every time you refuse an excuse, you're doing a mental push-up. Every time you choose action over explanation, you're building mental muscle. Every time you move forward despite your doubts, you're proving to yourself that you're stronger than your circumstances. And that proof accumulates. It builds confidence. It creates momentum. It develops the kind of mental strength that doesn't break under pressure. The people who achieve extraordinary things aren't people who never feel like quitting. They're people who quit making excuses for why they should quit. They're people who trained their minds to find solutions instead of problems. They're people who built their mental strength through the daily practice of refusing to let weakness win. Your mind will always offer you excuses. That's what untrained minds do. They look for the path of least resistance. They try to protect you from discomfort. They want to keep you safe and comfortable. But safe and comfortable is also weak and stagnant. If you want to grow, you have to train your mind to choose strength over safety. You have to build the mental muscle that pushes through when everything inside you wants to give up. This is your foundation. This is where mental strength begins. Not with what you achieve, but with what you refuse. Not with what you accomplish, but with what you won't accept. Not with what you gain, but with what you give up. You give up the luxury of excuses. You give up the comfort of explanations. You give up the weakness of justifications. And in return, you build something that can't be taken away from you. Mental strength that lasts. Chapter 2. Use other people's complaints as your competitive advantage. While everyone around you is complaining, you can be getting stronger. While they're explaining why things are impossible, you can be figuring out how to make them possible. While they're focused on problems, you can be focused on solutions. Their complaints aren't just noise. They're information. Information about who you don't want to become. Information about what separates the strong from the weak. Information about the opportunity that's right in front of you. Most people don't realize that complainers are actually showing you the blueprint for failure. They're demonstrating exactly what not to do. They're giving you a masterclass in weakness. And if you're paying attention, if you're smart, you can use their weakness as your strength training. Every complaint you hear is a reminder to choose differently. Every excuse you witness is motivation to be better. Listen to what people complain about most. They complain about not having enough time, but they spend hours scrolling through social media. They complain about being broke, but they won't invest in themselves. They complain about being out of shape, but they won't exercise. They complain about being stuck, but they won't take risks. They complain about not having opportunities, but they won't create them. See the pattern? They want different results without different actions. But you can be different. You can use their complaints as your roadmap to strength. When someone complains about not having time, you can choose to manage your time better. When someone complains about being tired, you can choose to build energy through discipline. When someone complains about things being too hard, you can choose to get stronger. Their weakness becomes your workout. This isn't about being judgmental. This isn't about looking down on others. This is about being strategic. This is about using every input in your environment to make you stronger, including the negative inputs, especially the negative inputs. Because negative inputs can teach you just as much as positive ones if you know how to process them correctly. Every time you hear someone make an excuse, ask yourself, what would strength do here? Every time you hear someone complain, ask yourself, how can I use this as motivation? Every time you witness someone giving up, ask yourself, how can I use this to get stronger? You're not being cold. You're being strategic. You're using every piece of information to build mental muscle. The strongest people in the world didn't get strong by avoiding weakness. They got strong by learning from it, by studying it, by understanding it so well that they could choose the opposite. They used other people's limitations as lessons. They used other people's excuses as education. They used other people's complaints as competitive intelligence. Think about it this way. Every person who's complaining is removing themselves from your competition. Every person who's making excuses is eliminating themselves from the race. Every person who's giving up is clearing the path for you. While they're busy explaining why they can't, you're busy figuring out how you can. While they're focused on obstacles, you're focused on opportunities. While they're building reasons to quit, you're building reasons to continue. This creates a massive advantage. While others are wasting mental energy on complaints, you're investing mental energy in solutions. While others are weakening their mindset with negative thinking, you're strengthening your mindset with positive action. While others are training their brains to see problems, you're training your brain to see possibilities. But here's the key. You have to be intentional about this. You have to make a conscious choice to use other people's weakness as your strength training. It doesn't happen automatically. Your natural tendency might be to get dragged down by their negativity. Your natural response might be to join in their complaints. Your natural reaction might be to match their energy. Instead, do the opposite. When someone complains about their boss, be grateful for your opportunity to learn and grow. When someone complains about their workload, be grateful for your chance to develop skills. When someone complains about their circumstances, be grateful for your ability to change yours. Use their dissatisfaction as fuel for your satisfaction. Use their weakness as motivation for your strength. Start paying attention to the patterns. Notice what people complain about most consistently. Notice what excuses come up most frequently. Notice what problems people focus on most intensely. Then ask yourself, how can I make sure I never fall into these same traps? How can I build strength in these exact areas? How can I use their weakness to become stronger? This approach transforms every negative interaction into a positive opportunity. Every complaint becomes a lesson. Every excuse becomes motivation. Every act of weakness becomes a reminder to choose strength. You're no longer dragged down by other people's negativity. You're lifted up by it. You're strengthened by it. You're motivated by it. The people who build exceptional mental strength aren't people who avoid negativity. They're people who transform negativity into fuel. They're people who use other people's weakness as weight training for their own strength. They're people who see every complaint as a competitive advantage, every excuse as an edge, every act of weakness as an opportunity to be stronger. This doesn't mean you become callous or unsympathetic. You can still have compassion for people's struggles. You can still offer help when appropriate. But you don't let their weakness become your weakness. You don't let their excuses become your excuses. You don't let their complaints become your complaints. Instead, you use their challenges as reminders to be grateful for your opportunities. You use their limitations as motivation to remove your own. Remember, mental strength is built through contrast. You become stronger by choosing differently than the crowd. You develop resilience by refusing to follow the path of least resistance. You build character by doing what others won't do. And one of the things others won't do is use negative inputs as positive fuel. They let complaints weaken them. You let complaints strengthen you. Every day, you're surrounded by people who are showing you exactly how not to live. They're demonstrating the mindset that leads to weakness. They're modeling the behavior that creates limitations. They're teaching you, through their example, what it looks like to be mentally soft. Use that education. Learn from it. Let it make you stronger. This is how you build a competitive advantage while others build excuses. This is how you develop mental strength while others develop mental weakness. This is how you rise while others fall. Not by avoiding the negativity around you, but by transforming it into the fuel that powers your growth. Chapter 3. Train your mind to see solutions when others see only problems. The difference between strong minds and weak minds isn't intelligence. It's perspective. Strong minds have been trained to see solutions. Weak minds have been trained to see problems. And this training happens through repetition, through practice, through the daily choice to focus on what's possible instead of what's impossible, through the consistent decision to look for ways forward instead of reasons to stop. Most people's minds are problem-finding machines. They look at a situation and immediately see what's wrong with it. What won't work? What's missing? What's difficult? What's risky? Their brains have been trained to spot obstacles before opportunities, to identify threats before possibilities, to find reasons to worry before reasons to be optimistic. And the more they practice this pattern, the stronger it becomes. But you can train your mind differently. You can develop the habit of solution finding instead of problem finding. You can build the mental muscle that automatically looks for ways to make things work instead of reasons why they won't. You can create a mindset that sees challenges as puzzles to solve rather than walls to stop you. This isn't about being unrealistic. This isn't about ignoring genuine difficulties. This is about training your brain to be useful instead of destructive. When most people encounter a problem, their first instinct is to explain why it can't be solved, why it's too hard, why it's too expensive, why it's too complicated, why it's too risky. Their minds immediately generate a list of reasons to give up, a catalogue of justifications for inaction, a collection of excuses for staying exactly where they are. But when solution-focused minds encounter the same problem, their first instinct is different. They ask, what would it take to solve this? Who has solved something similar? What resources would we need? What's the smallest step we could take today? What would success look like? Their minds immediately start generating possibilities, creating options, identifying pathways forward. This isn't a personality trait. This isn't something you're born with or without. This is a skill, a mental habit, a way of thinking that can be developed through practice. And the more you practice it, the stronger it becomes, the more natural it feels, the more automatic it gets, until eventually solution finding becomes your default mode of thinking. Start by catching yourself in problem-focused thinking. Notice when your mind immediately jumps to what's wrong with the situation. Notice when your first reaction is to explain why something won't work. Notice when you automatically focus on obstacles instead of opportunities. This awareness is the first step. You can't change what you don't notice. You can't improve what you don't acknowledge. Then comes the redirection. When you catch your mind focusing on problems, consciously shift to solutions. Ask yourself better questions. Instead of, why won't this work? Ask, how could this work? Instead of, what's wrong with this? Ask, what's right with this? Instead of, why is this so hard? Ask, how can I make this easier? Instead of, who's to blame? Ask, what can I control? This redirection trains your brain to be useful instead of destructive. It builds the mental muscle that looks for answers instead of excuses. It develops the habit of possibility thinking instead of limitation thinking. And over time, this new pattern becomes automatic. Your mind starts naturally looking for solutions. It becomes a solution-generating machine instead of a problem-generating machine. The strongest people you know aren't people who never encounter problems. They're people who've trained their minds to see problems as opportunities to get stronger. They're people who've developed the mental habit of solution finding. They're people who've built the psychological muscle that automatically looks for ways forward instead of reasons to stop. Think about the challenges you're facing right now. How much mental energy are you spending on explaining why they're difficult? How much time are you investing in cataloging all the reasons they can't be solved? How much focus are you giving to the obstacles instead of the opportunities? This mental energy could be redirected. This time could be reinvested. This focus could be refocused. What if you took all that problem-focused energy and channeled it into solution-focused thinking? What if you used all that time spent complaining to instead brainstorm possibilities? What if you redirected all that focus from obstacles to opportunities? How much stronger would your mind become? How much more progress would you make? How much more capable would you feel? Solution-focused thinking doesn't mean ignoring real challenges. It means approaching them strategically instead of emotionally. It means looking for ways to overcome them instead of reasons to be defeated by them. It means treating them as temporary obstacles instead of permanent barriers. It means using them as opportunities to build strength instead of excuses to stay weak. Every problem you encounter is training for your mind. You can either train it to be weak by focusing on why things won't work, Or you can train it to be strong by focusing on how they could work. You can either build the mental habit of defeat, or you can build the mental habit of victory. You can either develop a problem-focused mindset, or you can develop a solution-focused mindset. The people who achieve extraordinary things aren't people with extraordinary problems. They're people with extraordinary approaches to ordinary problems. They're people who've trained their minds to see solutions where others see only obstacles. They're people who've developed the mental strength to find ways forward when others find reasons to stop. This mental training happens through repetition, through the daily practice of choosing solution-focused thinking over problem-focused thinking, through the consistent decision to look for possibilities instead of limitations, through the regular habit of asking better questions instead of making worse statements. And the more you practice this, the stronger your mind becomes. Start today. Start now. The next time you encounter a challenge, resist the urge to immediately focus on what's wrong with it. Instead, focus on what could be right about it. Resist the impulse to explain why it won't work. Instead, explore how it could work. Resist the tendency to see only obstacles. Instead, look for opportunities. This shift in thinking will transform your mental strength. It will change how you approach challenges. It will alter how you handle setbacks. It will revolutionize how you see the world. Because now your mind is working for you instead of against you. Now your thoughts are building strength instead of weakness. Now your mental energy is focused on progress instead of problems. Remember, your mind goes where you direct it. If you direct it toward problems, it will find problems. If you direct it toward solutions, it will find solutions. If you train it to see obstacles, it will see obstacles. If you train it to see opportunities, it will see opportunities. The choice is yours. The training is up to you. The results are in your hands. Chapter 4. Build mental toughness by doing what you say you'll do every single time. Your word is your bond, not just with others, but with yourself. Every time you say you'll do something and then don't do it, you're training your mind to accept weakness. You're teaching your brain that your commitments are optional. You're building the habit of giving up when things get uncomfortable. And this pattern doesn't just affect big goals. It affects everything. Your confidence, your self-respect, your mental strength, your ability to trust yourself when things get tough. Most people make promises to themselves that they don't keep. They say they'll wake up early, then hit snooze. They say they'll exercise, then skip it. They say they'll eat healthy, then order junk food. They say they'll start the project, then procrastinate. They say they'll stop the bad habit, then repeat it tomorrow. And every time they break their word to themselves, they're weakening their mental foundation. They're building the identity of someone who can't be trusted, even by themselves. But every time you keep your word to yourself, especially when you don't feel like it, you're building mental toughness. You're proving that you're stronger than your emotions. You're demonstrating that your commitments matter more than your comfort. You're developing the kind of mental strength that doesn't bend when pressure increases. You're training your mind to follow through regardless of how you feel. This is how mental toughness is actually built. Not through one big moment of heroism, through thousands of small moments of integrity, through the daily practice of doing what you said you'd do, even when you don't want to, through the consistent choice to honor your commitments, especially when they're inconvenient, through the regular decision to value your word more than your comfort. Think about the commitments you've made to yourself recently, the goals you've set, the standards you've established, the changes you've promised to make. How many of them have you actually followed through on? How many times have you kept your word to yourself when it was difficult? How often have you chosen your commitment over your comfort? This isn't about judgment. This is about awareness. Because you can't build mental strength on a foundation of broken promises. Mental toughness isn't built through what you do when you feel motivated. It's built through what you do when motivation is gone. When you're tired, when you're busy, when you're stressed, when you're discouraged, when you have every excuse to quit but you don't, when your emotions are screaming for you to stop but you keep going, when your mind is offering you 100 reasons to give up but you choose to continue. This is why small commitments matter so much. If you can't keep your word about waking up early, how can you trust yourself with bigger goals? If you can't follow through on exercise, how can you rely on yourself in crisis? If you can't stick to your diet, how can you depend on yourself when real pressure hits? Mental toughness is built through consistency in small things, not just performance in big things. Every kept commitment is a deposit in your mental strength account. Every followed-through promise is proof that you can be trusted. Every completed task, especially the ones you didn't want to do, is evidence that you're stronger than your circumstances. And this evidence accumulates. It builds confidence. It creates momentum. It develops the kind of self-trust that can't be shaken by external pressure. But every broken commitment is a withdrawal from that same account. Every unfulfilled promise is proof that you can't be relied upon. Every quit task, especially when things get uncomfortable, is evidence that you're controlled by your emotions rather than your decisions. And this evidence also accumulates. It builds doubt. It creates hesitation. It develops the kind of self-mistrust that crumbles under pressure. The difference between mentally tough people and mentally weak people isn't that tough people never feel like quitting. They feel like quitting all the time. The difference is that they've trained themselves to act according to their commitments, not their feelings. They've built the habit of following through regardless of their emotional state. They've developed the mental muscle that keeps going when everything inside them wants to stop. This training happens through deliberate practice, through making commitments and keeping them, especially when you don't feel like it, through saying you'll do something and then doing it, regardless of your mood, through establishing standards and maintaining them, even when they're inconvenient, through building the identity of someone whose word means something, first and foremost to yourself. Start with small commitments. Don't try to revolutionize your entire life overnight. Pick one thing you can commit to daily, and then do it every single day for a week, then a month, then 3 months. Make it small enough that you have no excuse not to do it, but meaningful enough that doing it builds your confidence. Maybe it's making your bed. Maybe it's drinking a glass of water first thing in the morning. Maybe it's writing 1 sentence in a journal. Maybe it's doing 10 push-ups. The specific commitment doesn't matter as much as the consistency. What matters is that you say you'll do it, and then you do it. What matters is that you build the habit of keeping your word to yourself. What matters is that you develop the mental pattern of following through regardless of how you feel. This pattern then transfers to bigger commitments, bigger goals, bigger challenges. As you build this foundation of small commitments, you can expand to larger ones, but never expand faster than your ability to maintain consistency. Mental toughness is built through sustainable practice, not unsustainable intensity. It's better to keep a small commitment for a year than to break a big commitment after a week. It's better to build slowly, and solidly than to start fast and fail quickly. The people who develop extraordinary mental toughness aren't people who make extraordinary commitments. They're people who make ordinary commitments and keep them extraordinarily consistently. They're people who understand that mental strength is built through the accumulation of kept promises, not through the intensity of big gestures. They're people who value their word enough to honor it, especially when no one else is watching. This is also how you develop the mental toughness to handle unexpected challenges. When life hits you with something you didn't plan for, you need to know that you can trust yourself to respond with strength instead of weakness. You need to have confidence in your ability to follow through when things get difficult. You need to have evidence that you're someone who doesn't quit when pressure increases. This evidence comes from the daily practice of keeping your word to yourself. Remember, mental toughness isn't about being hard on yourself. It's about being reliable to yourself. It's about becoming someone you can count on, especially when no one else can. It's about building the kind of internal strength that doesn't waver when external conditions change. It's about developing the mental foundation that holds steady when everything else is shaking. Your commitments to yourself are the building blocks of your mental strength. Every kept promise makes you stronger. Every followed-through decision increases your capacity to handle pressure. Every completed task, especially the difficult ones, proves that you're more powerful than your circumstances. Build this strength one commitment at a time, one kept promise at a time, one followed-through decision at a time. Chapter 5. Develop inner strength by facing your fears instead of avoiding them. Fear is not your enemy. Avoidance is your enemy. Fear is information. It's telling you where your growth lives. It's pointing you toward the exact places where you need to build strength. It's showing you the boundaries of your comfort zone so you can expand them. But avoidance takes that information and turns it into limitation. It takes those growth opportunities and transforms them into barriers. It takes those strength-building moments and converts them into weakness-maintaining patterns. Most people spend their entire lives running from their fears. They organize their schedules around avoiding discomfort. They make decisions based on what feels safe instead of what builds strength. They choose paths that require less courage instead of paths that develop more character. And every time they avoid their fears, they're training their minds to be weak. They're building the habit of retreat instead of advance. They're developing the pattern of limitation instead of expansion. But you can choose differently. You can use your fears as a roadmap to strength. You can let your discomfort guide you toward growth. You can treat your anxiety as a compass pointing toward your next level. Every fear you face is a weight lifted in the gym of mental strength. Every discomfort you embrace is a rep completed in the workout of character development. Every scary situation you walk into is training for your mind to handle pressure. This doesn't mean being reckless. This doesn't mean ignoring legitimate dangers. This means distinguishing between real threats and imagined limitations. Most of the fears that control people's lives aren't about actual danger. They're about potential embarrassment, possible rejection, imagined failure, projected criticism. These aren't threats to your safety. These are threats to your ego. And when you let ego-based fears control your decisions, you let weakness control your life. Think about the fears that influence your daily choices. The fear of looking stupid that stops you from asking questions. The fear of rejection that prevents you from taking risks. The fear of failure that keeps you from trying new things. The fear of judgment that makes you hide your true thoughts, the fear of discomfort that keeps you in situations that don't serve you. These fears aren't protecting you, they're limiting you. Every time you avoid a fear-inducing situation, you're sending a message to your subconscious mind. You're telling it that you're not strong enough to handle discomfort. You're confirming that you need to be protected from challenges. You're reinforcing the belief that you're fragile and incapable. And your mind listens to these messages. It adapts to them. It starts to see you as someone who needs to be shielded from difficulty. But every time you face a fear, you're sending a different message. You're telling your subconscious that you're stronger than you thought. You're demonstrating that you can handle more than you believed. You're proving that discomfort doesn't destroy you. And your mind adapts to this message too. It starts to see you as someone who can handle challenges, someone who grows through difficulty, someone who gets stronger under pressure. This is how inner strength is developed, through the repeated experience of facing fears and surviving them, through the accumulated evidence that you're more resilient than you imagined, through the growing confidence that comes from knowing you can handle whatever comes your way. Not because nothing scares you, but because you've practiced moving forward despite being scared. Fear never fully goes away. Successful people aren't people who've eliminated fear from their lives. They're people who've learned to act in spite of fear. They're people who've trained themselves to move forward when every instinct tells them to move backward. They're people who've built the mental strength to choose growth over comfort, courage over safety, expansion over limitation. Start identifying the fears that are currently controlling your decisions. What are you avoiding because it makes you uncomfortable? What opportunities are you passing up because they feel risky? What conversations are you not having because they seem difficult? What goals are you not pursuing because they feel impossible? These avoidances aren't keeping you safe. They're keeping you small. Choose one fear to face this week. Not the biggest one. Not the most terrifying one. Pick something manageable but meaningful. Something that scares you but won't destroy you. Something that pushes your boundaries but doesn't completely overwhelm you. Then make a plan to face it. Not eventually. Not when you feel ready. This week. While the fear is still there. While you're still uncomfortable. The goal isn't to eliminate the fear before you act. The goal is to act while the fear is present. This is what builds inner strength. Not the absence of fear, but the presence of courage in spite of fear. Not the elimination of discomfort, but the willingness to be uncomfortable in service of growth. Not the removal of anxiety, but the development of ability to function effectively while anxious. When you face your fears, you don't just overcome specific limitations. You build general mental strength. You develop the capacity to handle uncertainty. You increase your tolerance for discomfort. You expand your ability to function under pressure. You strengthen your confidence in your own resilience. These benefits transfer to every area of your life. They make you stronger in ways you didn't expect. Remember, courage isn't the absence of fear. Courage is feeling the fear and choosing to move forward anyway. It's acknowledging the discomfort and deciding that your growth matters more than your comfort. It's recognizing the risk and determining that the potential reward is worth it. This is what separates people who build strength from people who build limitations. Your fears are showing you exactly where your next level of strength is waiting. They're pointing you toward the specific areas where you need to grow. They're highlighting the precise boundaries you need to expand. Don't waste this information by avoiding it. Use it. Let it guide you toward the person you're capable of becoming. Every fear you face makes the next one easier. Every discomfort you embrace increases your capacity for future discomfort. Every scary situation you walk into builds your confidence for the next scary situation. This compounds over time. What terrified you last year might feel manageable today. What seems impossible now might feel routine next year, but only if you build that strength through practice. Inner strength isn't built in comfortable moments. It's built in the spaces between comfort and panic. In the sweet spot of growth where you're challenged but not overwhelmed. Scared but not paralyzed. Uncomfortable but not incapacitated. This is where your mental muscle gets built. This is where your character gets developed. This is where your true strength emerges. Stop waiting for fear to go away before you act. Start acting while fear is present. Stop organizing your life around avoiding discomfort. Start organizing your life around building strength. Stop letting your fears control your decisions. Start letting your decisions control your fears. This is how you develop the kind of inner strength that can't be shaken by external circumstances. Chapter 6. Choose discipline over comfort in every small moment that matters. Discipline isn't built in the big moments. It's built in the small ones, in the tiny decisions that nobody sees, in the micro choices that seem insignificant but compound into massive results, in the split-second moments where you choose what's right over what's easy, where you pick what builds you over what soothes you, where you select growth over comfort. These moments happen hundreds of times every day, and each one is an opportunity to build mental strength or to reinforce mental weakness. Most people think discipline is about the dramatic moments, the big speeches, the grand gestures, the life-changing decisions. But real discipline lives in the mundane, in choosing to get up when the alarm goes off instead of hitting snooze, in choosing to eat the healthy meal instead of the junk food, in choosing to do the work instead of scrolling through social media, in choosing to have the difficult conversation instead of avoiding it, in choosing to exercise instead of making excuses. These small moments don't feel important when they're happening. They feel trivial. They feel like they don't matter. They feel like you can skip them without consequence. But that's exactly what makes them so powerful. Because when you choose discipline in moments that don't seem to matter, you're building the mental muscle that will serve you in moments that do matter. You're training your mind to choose what's right, even when it's hard. You're developing the habit of strength, even when no one's watching. Every time you choose comfort over discipline in a small moment, you're training your brain to be weak. You're teaching it that temporary pleasure is more important than long-term growth. You're reinforcing the pattern of choosing what feels good now over what will be good later. And this pattern compounds. It gets stronger. It becomes your default response to difficulty, until eventually choosing comfort becomes automatic, and choosing discipline becomes nearly impossible. But every time you choose discipline over comfort in a small moment, you're training your brain to be strong. You're teaching it that your long-term goals are more important than your short-term feelings. You're reinforcing the pattern of choosing what builds you over what drains you. And this pattern also compounds. It also gets stronger. It also becomes your default response to difficulty, until eventually choosing discipline becomes automatic and choosing comfort becomes the exception. Think about your typical day. How many small moments of choice do you encounter? The moment you wake up and decide whether to get up or stay in bed. The moment you feel hungry and decide what to eat. The moment you feel bored and decide how to spend your time. The moment you feel tired and decide whether to push through or give up. The moment you feel uncomfortable and decide whether to face it or avoid it. Each of these moments is a training opportunity for your mind. The people who develop extraordinary mental strength aren't people who never feel the pull of comfort. They feel it constantly. They want to sleep in. They want to eat junk food. They want to avoid difficult tasks. They want to take the easy path. But they've trained themselves to act according to their goals instead of their feelings. They've built the mental muscle that chooses discipline, even when discipline is uncomfortable. This training doesn't happen overnight. It happens through the accumulation of small choices, through the daily practice of choosing what's right over what's easy, through the consistent selection of growth over comfort, through the regular decision to act according to your standards instead of your emotions. And the more you practice this, the stronger your discipline becomes. The more natural it feels, the more automatic it gets. But here's what most people miss. They think discipline means making yourself miserable. They think it means denying yourself all pleasure. They think it means living a life of constant deprivation. That's not discipline. That's punishment. Real discipline is about delayed gratification, not eliminated gratification. It's about choosing better pleasure later instead of worse pleasure now. It's about investing in your future self instead of indulging your current feelings. When you choose discipline in small moments, you're not depriving yourself. You're preparing yourself. You're building the mental strength that will allow you to handle bigger challenges. You're developing the character that will carry you through difficult times. You're creating the foundation that will support your future success. Every small disciplined choice is an investment in the person you're becoming. Start paying attention to these small moments in your day. Notice when you're faced with a choice between what's easy and what's right. Notice when you feel the pull of comfort trying to drag you away from growth. Notice when your emotions are trying to override your commitments. These moments are gifts. They're opportunities to build strength. They're chances to prove to yourself that you're stronger than your circumstances. The next time you're faced with one of these moments, pause. Recognize what's happening. Acknowledge that this is a choice point, a moment where you can either build strength or reinforce weakness. A split second where you can either move closer to your goals or further away from them. Then, choose consciously. Choose deliberately. Choose what builds you instead of what soothes you. Don't expect this to be easy at first. Your brain has been trained to choose comfort. It's been conditioned to seek the path of least resistance. It's been programmed to avoid discomfort. This programming doesn't disappear overnight. But it can be reprogrammed through consistent practice, through repeated choices, through the daily decision to act according to your values instead of your emotions. Remember, discipline is a skill. Like any skill, it gets stronger with practice and weaker with neglect. Every time you choose discipline, you're strengthening this skill. Every time you choose comfort, you're weakening it. The choice is yours. The power is in your hands. The results are determined by what you do in these small moments that nobody sees, but everybody feels the effects of. This is how mental strength is really built, not through grand gestures or dramatic transformations, through the accumulation of small, disciplined choices, through the daily practice of choosing what's right over what's easy, through the consistent selection of growth over comfort, through the regular decision to invest in your future instead of indulging your present. One small moment at a time. One disciplined choice at a time. One step towards strength at a time. Chapter 7. Strengthen your mindset by finishing everything you start, no matter how small. Finishing is a skill, and like every skill, it gets stronger with practice and weaker with neglect. Every time you start something and see it through to completion, you're building the mental muscle of follow-through. You're training your brain to associate starting with finishing. You're developing the habit of completion. But every time you start something and abandon it halfway through, you're weakening this muscle. You're training your brain to associate starting with quitting. You're developing the habit of incompletion. Most people are serial starters. They begin projects with enthusiasm, start routines with motivation, initiate changes with excitement. But when the initial energy fades, when the work gets boring, when the progress gets slow, they abandon what they started and move on to something new. They become addicted to the feeling of beginning but allergic to the discipline of finishing. And this pattern doesn't just affect their projects. It affects their confidence, their self-respect, their ability to trust themselves with bigger goals. Every unfinished task is a vote for the identity of someone who doesn't follow through. Every abandoned project is evidence that you can't be trusted to complete what you start. Every quit goal is proof that your commitments are conditional on your feelings, and this evidence accumulates in your subconscious mind. It builds a self-image of someone who starts strong but finishes weak. Someone who has good intentions but poor execution. Someone who can't be relied upon, even by themselves. But every finished task, no matter how small, is a vote for the identity of someone who follows through. Every completed project is evidence that you can be trusted to do what you say you'll do. Every achieved goal is proof that your commitments are stronger than your feelings, and this evidence also accumulates. It builds a self-image of someone who starts strong and finishes stronger. Someone who has both good intentions and excellent execution. Someone who can be relied upon, especially by themselves. This is why small completions matter so much. They're not just about the specific task or project. They're about the identity you're building. They're about the mental strength you're developing. They're about the self-trust you're establishing. When you finish small things consistently, you build the confidence to tackle bigger things. When you complete minor projects reliably, you develop the capacity to handle major challenges. Think about the unfinished business in your life right now. The books you started but never finished reading. The projects you began but never completed. The habits you initiated but never maintained. The goals you set but never achieved. Each of these represents a missed opportunity to build mental strength. Each one is a training session you skipped. Each one is a chance to develop follow-through that you let slip away. But it's not too late. You can change this pattern. You can become someone who finishes what they start. You can develop the mental strength that comes from consistent completion. But it requires a shift in how you approach starting things. It requires being more intentional about what you begin and more committed to what you continue. Before you start anything new, pause and ask yourself, am I willing to see this through to completion? Do I have the time and energy to finish this properly? Am I starting this for the right reasons? Or am I just chasing the feeling of beginning something new? If you can't honestly answer yes to these questions, don't start. Wait until you can make a real commitment to finishing what you begin. This doesn't mean you have to finish everything perfectly. It doesn't mean you can never adjust your approach or modify your goals. It means you commit to seeing things through to a meaningful conclusion instead of abandoning them at the first sign of difficulty or boredom. It means you define what completion looks like before you start, so you know when you've actually finished. Start with small things, really small things. Things that you can complete in a day or a week. Things that don't require months of sustained effort. Things that give you quick wins and build momentum. Read a short book from start to finish. Complete a small project around the house. Finish organizing one drawer or one closet. Learn one new skill to a basic level of competency. The specific task doesn't matter as much as the completion. Every time you finish something, celebrate it. Acknowledge what you've accomplished. Recognize the mental strength you've built. Appreciate the self-trust you've developed. This isn't about ego or arrogance. This is about reinforcing the neural pathways that associate starting with finishing. This is about building the identity of someone who follows through. This is about developing the habit of completion. As you build momentum with small completions, you can gradually take on larger projects, but never take on more than you can realistically finish. It's better to complete 10 small projects than to abandon one large project. It's better to build a consistent pattern of finishing than to attempt something impressive but unsustainable. Mental strength is built through sustainable practice, not unsustainable intensity. Pay attention to your urge to start new things before finishing current things. This urge is normal. The brain loves novelty. It gets excited by new possibilities. It gets bored by repetitive work. But giving in to this urge weakens your finishing muscle. It reinforces the pattern of starting without completing. It builds the habit of abandonment instead of achievement. When you feel the urge to start something new, remind yourself of what you're currently working on. Ask yourself if this new thing is really more important than finishing what you've already begun. Consider whether starting something new is actually avoiding the discipline required to finish something old. Most of the time, the best choice is to focus on completion before beginning something new. This applies to everything in your life: books you're reading, projects you're working on, skills you're developing, habits you're building, relationships you're nurturing, goals you're pursuing. Each of these areas benefits from the discipline of finishing what you start. Each of these areas suffers when you abandon things before completion. The people who achieve extraordinary things aren't necessarily the people who start the most projects. They're the people who finish the most projects. They're the people who've developed the mental strength to push through when things get difficult. They're the people who've built the habit of completion. They're the people who understand that finishing is just as important as starting, if not more important. Remember, every completion builds mental strength. Every finish line crossed increases your capacity to handle bigger challenges. Every project completed proves that you can be trusted with greater responsibilities. Every goal achieved demonstrates that you have the power to turn intentions into results. This is how you build unshakable confidence in your ability to accomplish what you set out to do. Your mental strength is directly related to your completion rate. The more you finish, the stronger you become. The more you abandon, the weaker you get. The choice is yours. The power is in your hands. The results are determined by whether you're willing to do the unglamorous work of finishing what you start, especially when you don't feel like it. Chapter 8. Build resilience by embracing struggle as your greatest teacher. Struggle is not your enemy. Comfort is your enemy. Struggle builds character. Comfort builds weakness. Struggle teaches you what you're capable of. Comfort teaches you what you're afraid of. Struggle shows you your strength. Comfort shows you your limitations. Struggle prepares you for life's challenges. Comfort leaves you vulnerable to life's inevitable difficulties. The choice between embracing struggle and avoiding it is the choice between building resilience and building fragility. Most people spend their entire lives trying to avoid struggle. They organize their schedules around minimizing discomfort. They make decisions based on what feels easiest. They choose paths that require the least effort. They select options that involve the least risk. And while this might feel good in the short term, it creates massive weakness in the long term. Because when struggle eventually shows up, and it always does, they're unprepared, they're untrained, they're soft. But struggle is not something that happens to you. Struggle is something that happens for you. It's life's way of making you stronger. It's the universe's training program for resilience. It's reality's method of developing your character. Every difficult situation you encounter is an opportunity to build mental muscle. Every challenge you face is a chance to discover what you're made of. Every hardship you endure is training for future hardships. The people who develop extraordinary resilience aren't people who never face struggle. They're people who've learned to see struggle as education. They're people who understand that difficulty is development. They're people who recognize that pressure creates diamonds and struggle creates strength. They don't try to avoid hard times. They try to learn from them. They don't run from challenges. They run toward them. They don't see problems as punishments. They see problems as promotions to a higher level of mental strength. This perspective shift changes everything. When you stop seeing struggle as something bad that's happening to you and start seeing it as something good that's happening for you, you stop being a victim of your circumstances. You start being a student of your circumstances. You stop asking, "Why me?" and start asking, "What can I learn?" You stop focusing on the pain and start focusing on the gain. You stop being weakened by difficulty and start being strengthened by it. Think about the struggles you've faced in your life. The times when everything seemed impossible. The periods when you thought you couldn't handle any more pressure. The moments when you felt like giving up. What did those experiences teach you? How did they change you? How did they make you stronger? If you're honest, you'll probably realize that your greatest periods of growth came from your greatest periods of struggle. This doesn't mean you should seek out unnecessary hardship. This doesn't mean you should create problems where none exist. This means you should stop running from the struggles that naturally occur in the process of living and growing. This means you should embrace the difficulties that come with pursuing meaningful goals. This means you should welcome the challenges that arise when you step outside your comfort zone. Every struggle you face is asking you the same question. Are you going to let this break you or make you? Are you going to use this experience to build strength or to build excuses? Are you going to come out of this stronger or weaker? The struggle itself doesn't determine the answer. Your response to the struggle determines the answer. Your attitude toward the difficulty determines the outcome. When you're in the middle of a struggle, it's hard to see the lesson. It's hard to find the gift. It's hard to appreciate the growth opportunity. All you can see is the pain. All you can feel is the pressure. All you can think about is making it stop. But this is exactly when you need to shift your perspective. This is when you need to remind yourself that struggle is your teacher, not your enemy. This is when you need to ask what this experience is trying to teach you. Some struggles teach you patience. Some teach you perseverance. Some teach you humility. Some teach you resourcefulness. Some teach you courage. Some teach you compassion. Some teach you strength you didn't know you had. Some teach you capabilities you didn't know you possessed. Some teach you resilience you didn't know you could develop. But they only teach you these things if you're willing to learn, if you're willing to see struggle as education instead of punishment. Resilience isn't built in comfortable moments. It's built in uncomfortable moments. It's built when you're stretched beyond what feels manageable. It's built when you're tested beyond what feels fair. It's built when you're challenged beyond what feels possible. This is when your true character emerges. This is when your real strength reveals itself. This is when your authentic resilience develops. Most people try to build resilience through positive thinking or motivational content. But resilience isn't built through inspiration. It's built through perspiration. It's built through the sweat of actual struggle. It's built through the effort of actual challenge. It's built through the work of actual difficulty. You can't think your way to resilience. You can only struggle your way to resilience. Start reframing your current struggles. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" ask, "What is this teaching me?" Instead of thinking, "This is too hard," think, "This is making me stronger." Instead of believing, "I can't handle this," believe, "I'm learning to handle this." Instead of feeling, "This is unfair," feel, "This is preparation." This reframing doesn't change the struggle, but it changes your relationship to the struggle. And that changes everything. Remember, every person you admire has struggled. Every success story includes failure. Every strength was built through difficulty. Every wisdom was earned through hardship. Every character was forged through challenge. You're not being singled out for punishment when you struggle. You're being prepared for greatness. You're being trained for leadership. You're being developed for purpose. The strongest people you know aren't people who never fell down. They're people who got up every time they fell down. They're people who learned from every failure. They're people who grew from every setback. They're people who used every struggle as fuel for their fire. They're people who understood that resilience isn't about avoiding difficulty. It's about transforming difficulty into strength. Your current struggles are not obstacles preventing you from reaching your potential. They are the path to your potential. They are not roadblocks stopping your growth. They are the road to your growth. They are not problems to be avoided. They are promotions to be embraced. Every struggle you face is an opportunity to build the resilience that will serve you for the rest of your life. Stop running from struggle. Start running toward it. Stop avoiding challenge. Start embracing it. Stop seeing difficulty as your enemy. Start seeing it as your teacher. This shift in perspective will transform your entire experience of life. It will turn your struggles into strengths. It will convert your challenges into character. It will transform your hardships into hope. And it will build the kind of resilience that cannot be broken by any future struggle. Chapter 9. Develop mental toughness through daily acts of self-discipline when no one is watching. The person you are when nobody's watching is the person you really are. Everything else is performance. Everything else is image management. Everything else is trying to impress others instead of building yourself. But the moments when you're alone, when there's no audience, when there's no external accountability, when there's no social pressure, these are the moments that define your character. These are the moments that build your mental toughness. These are the moments that determine who you really are beneath all the facades. Most people are different when they're alone than when they're around others. They're more disciplined in public and more lenient in private. They hold higher standards when others are watching and lower standards when others aren't. They work harder when there's external pressure and lazier when there's no external motivation. But this Inconsistency creates internal weakness. It builds a character that depends on external circumstances instead of internal standards. Mental toughness is built in the private moments. In the early morning when nobody knows if you got up or slept in. In the evening when nobody knows if you stuck to your plan or gave in to distraction. In the quiet moments when nobody knows if you did the work or made excuses. In the solitary hours when nobody knows if you pushed yourself or took the easy path. These moments don't make headlines. They don't get applause. They don't receive recognition. But they build something more valuable than any external reward. They build internal strength. Every act of self-discipline you perform when nobody's watching is a deposit in your mental toughness account. Every time you choose what's right over what's easy in private, you're building the strength that will serve you in public. Every time you maintain your standards when nobody's checking, you're developing the character that will hold up under pressure. Every time you do what you said you'd do, when nobody would know if you didn't, you're creating the foundation of unshakable integrity. But every act of self-indulgence you allow when nobody's watching is a withdrawal from that same account. Every time you choose what's easy over what's right in private, you're weakening the strength you'll need in public. Every time you lower your standards when nobody's checking, you're eroding the character that pressure will test. Every time you skip what you said you'd do when nobody would know if you did, you're undermining the foundation of your integrity. The people who demonstrate extraordinary mental toughness under pressure aren't people who suddenly become disciplined when the stakes are high. They're people who've been disciplined when the stakes were low. They're people who built their character in private before they needed it in public. They're people who developed their strength in the shadows before they were tested in the spotlight. They're people who proved their discipline to themselves before they proved it to anyone else. This is why your private habits matter more than your public accomplishments. Your private habits create your public results. Your private discipline determines your public performance. Your private standards establish your public strength. What you do when nobody's watching shapes what you're capable of when everybody's watching. The foundation is built in private. The structure is revealed in public. Think about your private moments over the past week. The times when you were alone with your choices. The moments when you could have taken the easy path without anyone knowing. The instances when you could have lowered your standards without external consequences. What did you choose? Did you maintain your discipline or relax it? Did you honor your commitments or ignore them? Did you act according to your values or your feelings? These choices might seem small in the moment, but they compound into massive results over time. Every private moment of discipline builds mental muscle. Every secret act of integrity strengthens character. Every hidden choice of growth over comfort expands capability. And every private moment of weakness builds mental flab. Every secret act of compromise weakens character. Every hidden choice of comfort over growth contracts capability. Mental toughness isn't a skill you can fake. It's not a performance you can put on when needed. It's a character trait that's either been built through consistent private discipline or weakened through consistent private indulgence. When pressure comes, when stakes are high, when everyone's watching, you don't rise to the level of your hopes. You fall to the level of your private discipline. You perform according to the standards you've maintained when nobody was checking. Start paying attention to your private choices, not just the big ones, the small ones, the seemingly insignificant ones, the ones that nobody would ever know about if you chose differently. Do you maintain the same standards in private that you claim to have in public? Do you work as hard when nobody's watching as you do when everybody's watching? Do you honor your commitments to yourself with the same integrity you show to your commitments to others? This is where real mental toughness is forged. In the choice to get up early when you could stay in bed. In the decision to eat healthy when you could eat junk. In the commitment to exercise when you could be lazy. In the discipline to work when you could procrastinate. In the integrity to tell the truth when you could get away with a lie. In the strength to do what's right when you could do what's easy. These aren't dramatic moments, they're ordinary moments. They're the daily, mundane, unglamorous choices that nobody celebrates but everybody benefits from. Because the person who makes these choices consistently in private becomes the person who can be trusted with bigger responsibilities in public. The person who demonstrates discipline in small things becomes the person who can handle discipline in big things. Don't wait for external pressure to force you to be disciplined. Don't wait for public accountability to make you maintain your standards. Don't wait for social recognition to motivate you to do what's right. Build that discipline now, in private, when it's harder, because there's no external reward. Build that character now, in secret, when it's more challenging, because there's no external validation. Build that strength now, in solitude, when it's tougher, because there's no external motivation. The mental toughness you build in private moments will serve you in public moments. The discipline you develop when nobody's watching will support you when everybody's watching. The strength you create in the shadows will sustain you in the spotlight. But only if you're willing to do the unglamorous work of building character when there's no audience to impress, no recognition to receive, and no external pressure to maintain. This is the real test of mental toughness. Not how you perform when everyone's watching, but how you behave when nobody's watching. Not what you do when the stakes are high, but what you do when the stakes seem low. Not who you are in moments of crisis, but who you are in moments of ordinary choice. Build that person. Be that person. Become that person. One private moment of discipline at a time. Chapter 10. Create unbreakable strength by never compromising your standards for temporary relief. Your standards are not suggestions. They're not guidelines that change based on your mood. They're not flexible recommendations that bend when things get difficult. Your standards are the non-negotiable foundation of your character. They're the unwavering principles that define who you are. They're the immovable pillars that support your mental strength. And the moment you compromise them for temporary relief, you begin to weaken everything you've built. Most people treat their standards like mood rings. They change color based on circumstances. They lower their expectations when things get hard. They relax their principles when pressure increases. They compromise their values when comfort calls. They adjust their integrity when inconvenience arrives. And every time they do this, they're sending a message to their subconscious mind. These standards only matter when they're convenient. These values only apply when they're easy. This character only exists when it's comfortable. But true mental strength comes from maintaining your standards, especially when it's hard to maintain them, especially when lowering them would provide immediate relief, especially when compromising them would solve temporary problems, especially when abandoning them would make things easier. This is when your standards matter most. This is when they're actually tested. This is when they build the unbreakable strength that will serve you for life. Every time you maintain your standards despite pressure to lower them, you build something precious. You build self-respect. You build integrity. You build the kind of inner strength that cannot be shaken by external circumstances. You prove to yourself that your values are more important than your comfort. You demonstrate that your principles are stronger than your emotions. You show that your character is more valuable than your convenience. But every time you compromise your standards for temporary relief, you lose something precious. You lose self-respect. You lose integrity. You create cracks in the foundation of your character. You teach yourself that your values are negotiable. You learn that your principles are conditional. You discover that your character can be bought with temporary comfort. And once you start compromising, it becomes easier to compromise again, and again, and again. Think about the standards you've set for yourself, the way you want to treat people, the quality of work you want to produce, the level of integrity you want to maintain, the degree of excellence you want to pursue, the kind of person you want to be. Now think about the times when maintaining these standards was difficult, when it would have been easier to lower them, when compromising would have provided immediate relief. What did you choose? The people who develop unbreakable mental strength aren't people who never face pressure to compromise. They face this pressure constantly. The difference is that they've made a decision that their standards are non-negotiable. They've determined that temporary relief is never worth permanent damage to their character. They've chosen to build their identity on principles that don't change with circumstances. This doesn't mean they're rigid or inflexible. This doesn't mean they can't adapt their methods or adjust their approaches. This means they don't compromise their core values. They don't lower their fundamental standards. They don't sacrifice their essential principles. They find ways to maintain their integrity while navigating difficult situations. They discover methods to uphold their values while solving complex problems. The pressure to compromise will come in many forms. It might come as the temptation to cut corners when nobody's looking. It might appear as the opportunity to take credit for work you didn't do. It might present itself as the chance to lie to avoid consequences. It might show up as the option to quit when things get difficult. It might manifest as the invitation to lower your standards, to fit in with others. Each of these moments is a test of your commitment to your values, a test of your dedication to your principles, a test of your willingness to endure temporary discomfort to maintain permanent integrity. The people who pass these tests build unbreakable strength. The people who fail these tests build breakable weakness. The choice is yours in every moment when the pressure appears. Sometimes the pressure will be subtle, a small compromise that seems harmless, a minor adjustment that appears reasonable, a slight lowering of standards that feels justified. But small compromises lead to bigger compromises. Minor adjustments accumulate into major alterations. Slight lowerings of standards eventually become significant abandonments of principles. The people with unbreakable strength understand this. They know that character is built or destroyed in the small moments, not just the big ones. Start identifying the areas where you're most tempted to compromise. The situations that consistently challenge your standards. The circumstances that regularly pressure you to lower your values. The moments when temporary relief looks more attractive than permanent integrity. These are your testing grounds. These are the places where your character is being forged. These are the opportunities to build unbreakable strength. When you face these moments, remember what's at stake. You're not just deciding about one situation. You're deciding about the kind of person you're becoming. You're not just choosing between temporary options. You're choosing between temporary relief and permanent strength. You're not just making a decision about right now. You're making a decision about who you'll be for the rest of your life. The short-term cost of maintaining your standards is always less than the long-term cost of compromising them. The temporary discomfort of doing what's right is always less painful than the permanent regret of doing what's wrong. The immediate sacrifice of upholding your principles is always smaller than the lasting damage of abandoning them. This perspective helps you make better choices when the pressure is high. Remember, your standards are what separate you from the crowd. They're what make you reliable in an unreliable world. They're what make you trustworthy in an untrustworthy environment. They're what make you strong in a weak society. They're what build the kind of character that can withstand any storm, handle any pressure, and overcome any challenge. Don't negotiate with weakness. Don't bargain with compromise. Don't trade your integrity for temporary convenience. Build the kind of unbreakable strength that comes from never compromising your standards, no matter what. Build the kind of character that maintains its shape under pressure. Build the kind of mental toughness that doesn't bend when the winds blow. This is how you create strength that lasts. This is how you build character that endures. This is how you develop the kind of mental toughness that nothing can break. Chapter 11. Build mental armor by learning to think clearly under pressure. Pressure doesn't create character. Pressure reveals character. When everything is calm, when stakes are low, when there's no urgency, almost anyone can think clearly. Almost anyone can make good decisions. Almost anyone can stay composed. But when the heat is on, when time is running out, when consequences are real, when everyone is watching, that's when your true mental strength shows up. That's when you discover whether you've built mental armor or mental weakness. Most people's thinking falls apart under pressure. Their minds go blank. Their judgment gets cloudy. Their logic gets twisted. Their decision-making gets paralyzed. They make choices based on emotion instead of reason. They react instead of respond. They panic instead of plan. They let the pressure control their thinking instead of using their thinking to control the pressure. And this mental collapse under pressure isn't just inconvenient, it's dangerous. It costs opportunities. It creates mistakes. It builds regret. But some people think more clearly under pressure, not less clearly. They become more focused when stakes are high, not more scattered. They get calmer when urgency increases, not more anxious. They make better decisions when time is short, not worse decisions. They use pressure as fuel for clarity instead of allowing pressure to create confusion. This isn't a natural gift. This isn't a genetic advantage. This is a trained skill. This is mental armor that's been built through deliberate practice. Clear thinking under pressure is built the same way physical strength is built, through progressive overload, through gradual increases in difficulty, through consistent exposure to challenging conditions. You don't build physical strength by lifting the same light weight every day. You build it by gradually increasing the weight, increasing the repetitions, increasing the difficulty. Mental armor is built the same way, through gradually increasing mental challenges, through progressively more difficult thinking situations, through consistent exposure to pressure. The mistake most people make is they try to avoid pressure instead of using pressure to build strength. They organize their lives around minimizing stress instead of maximizing their ability to handle stress. They reduce challenges instead of increasing their capacity to meet challenges. They make their environment easier instead of making themselves stronger. This approach creates mental weakness, not mental strength. It builds dependency on perfect conditions instead of ability to perform in imperfect conditions. Start by understanding what happens to your thinking when pressure increases. Do you get overwhelmed and shut down? Do you get scattered and jump between thoughts? Do you get emotional and lose objectivity? Do you get rushed and make careless mistakes? Do you get paralyzed and avoid making decisions? Do you get defensive and stop listening to input? Awareness of your pressure patterns is the first step to changing your pressure patterns. Most people's thinking deteriorates under pressure because they focus on the pressure instead of the problem. They spend mental energy worrying about the consequences instead of working on the solution. They waste cognitive resources on anxiety instead of investing them in analysis. They use their mental capacity to imagine worst-case scenarios instead of creating best-case strategies. This misallocation of mental resources guarantees poor performance under pressure. Mental armor is built by training yourself to focus on what matters when pressure increases. When stakes are high, your attention should narrow to the essential elements. When time is short, your thinking should become more efficient, not more frantic. When consequences are real, your decision-making should become more careful, not more careless. When everyone is watching, your performance should improve, not deteriorate. This training happens through deliberate practice in pressure situations. You can't build mental armor in comfort. You have to expose yourself to controlled pressure to develop your ability to handle uncontrolled pressure. This means putting yourself in situations where stakes matter, where time is limited, where outcomes are uncertain, where performance counts, where mistakes have consequences. These situations are your mental gym. These experiences are your strength training. Start small. Create artificial pressure situations where you can practice clear thinking. Set tight deadlines for projects. Take on challenges that stretch your abilities. Put yourself in situations where you have to perform under observation. Volunteer for responsibilities that have real consequences. Each of these experiences is an opportunity to practice maintaining clear thinking when pressure increases. During these practice sessions, focus on your breathing. Pressure often creates shallow, rapid breathing, which reduces oxygen to the brain and impairs clear thinking. Train yourself to breathe deeply and slowly when you feel pressure building. This simple technique maintains oxygen flow to your brain and preserves your ability to think clearly under stress. Also, practice emotional regulation under pressure. Emotions aren't bad, but they can overwhelm rational thinking if they're not managed properly. Train yourself to acknowledge emotions without being controlled by them. Feel the anxiety, but don't let anxiety drive your decisions. Notice the frustration, but don't let frustration cloud your judgment. Experience the excitement, but don't let excitement make you careless. Clear thinking under pressure also requires mental organization. When pressure increases, your mind can become chaotic. Thoughts scatter. Priorities get confused. Important details get lost. Train yourself to organize your thinking systematically when pressure builds. What's the real problem? What are the possible solutions? What information do you need? What are the likely consequences of each option? This systematic approach prevents mental chaos under pressure. Practice making decisions with incomplete information. Pressure situations rarely give you all the information you want before you need to act. Mental armor includes the ability to make good decisions with partial data. Train yourself to gather essential information quickly, assess options efficiently, and choose decisively without perfect certainty. This skill is crucial for clear thinking under pressure. Also, build your tolerance for uncertainty. Pressure situations are often ambiguous. Outcomes are unclear. Variables are unknown. Mental armor includes comfort with uncertainty. Train yourself to function effectively when you can't predict or control all the variables. Learn to make progress despite ambiguity. Develop confidence in your ability to adapt as situations evolve. Remember that mental armor isn't built overnight. It's developed through consistent exposure to progressively challenging situations. Each pressure situation you navigate successfully builds your confidence for the next one. Each time you maintain clear thinking under stress, you strengthen your ability to do it again. Each moment you stay calm when others panic, you build your reputation as someone who can handle pressure. The people who perform best under pressure aren't people who never feel pressure. They feel pressure intensely. The difference is they've trained themselves to think clearly despite the pressure. They've built mental armor that protects their cognitive abilities when stakes are high. They've developed the skill of using pressure as fuel for focus, instead of allowing pressure to create chaos. This mental armor becomes your competitive advantage. While others are losing their composure, you're maintaining yours. While others are making emotional decisions, you're making rational ones. While others are getting overwhelmed by pressure, you're getting energized by it. While others are avoiding challenging situations, you're seeking them out as opportunities to build even stronger mental armor. Build this armor deliberately. Build it consistently. Build it through exposure to real pressure in controlled environments. Build it by practicing clear thinking when thinking is difficult. Build it by maintaining rationality when others are losing theirs. This is how you develop the mental strength that performs better under pressure, not worse. This is how you build thinking that gets clearer when stakes get higher, not cloudier. Chapter 12. Become unstoppable by treating setbacks as setup for comeback. Setbacks are not endings, they're beginnings. They're not conclusions, they're introductions. They're not final chapters. They're plot twists that make the story more interesting. But most people don't see setbacks this way. They see setbacks as evidence that they should quit, as proof that they're not meant to succeed, as signs that they should lower their expectations, as confirmations that their goals are unrealistic. This perspective guarantees that setbacks become permanent instead of temporary. Every person who has achieved anything significant has faced setbacks, not just minor inconveniences, major reversals, devastating failures, crushing defeats, seemingly insurmountable obstacles. The difference between those who become unstoppable and those who stay stopped isn't the presence or absence of setbacks. It's the response to setbacks. It's the interpretation of setbacks. It's the utilization of setbacks. Unstoppable people don't experience fewer setbacks. They experience setbacks differently. They don't see setbacks as reasons to quit. They see setbacks as reasons to get stronger. They don't see failures as evidence of their limitations. They see failures as information about what doesn't work. They don't see obstacles as permanent barriers. They see obstacles as temporary challenges that require creative solutions. This perspective shift changes everything. When you see setbacks as setup for comeback, you stop being defeated by temporary defeats. You stop being discouraged by temporary discouragement. You stop being weakened by temporary weakness. Instead, you start using setbacks as fuel for your fire. You start treating failures as education for your success. You start converting obstacles into opportunities. But this shift doesn't happen automatically. It requires mental training. It requires conscious choice. It requires deliberate practice. You have to train your mind to interpret setbacks positively instead of negatively. You have to practice finding the lessons in failures instead of just feeling the pain. You have to develop the skill of extracting value from every setback instead of just experiencing suffering from every setback. Start by redefining what setbacks mean. A setback is not evidence that you're on the wrong path. A setback is feedback that your current approach needs adjustment. A setback is not proof that your goal is impossible. A setback is information about what obstacles need to be overcome. A setback is not a sign that you lack ability. A setback is a signal that you need to develop new abilities. This reframing transforms your relationship with failure. Instead of avoiding situations where you might fail, you start seeking situations where failure teaches you something valuable. Instead of being paralyzed by the fear of setbacks, you become energized by the growth opportunities that setbacks provide. Instead of being weakened by temporary defeats, you become strengthened by the resilience that defeats develop. Every setback contains valuable information. Information about what doesn't work. Information about what you need to improve. Information about what skills you need to develop. Information about what knowledge you need to acquire. Information about what support you need to gather. Information about what strategies you need to change. But this information is only valuable if you extract it, if you study it, if you apply it. When you experience a setback, resist the urge to immediately try again with the same approach. That's not learning from the setback. That's ignoring the setback. Instead, pause and analyze. What went wrong? What could have gone better? What was missing? What assumptions were incorrect? What skills were lacking? What preparations were insufficient? This analysis transforms setbacks from painful experiences into valuable educations. Unstoppable people also understand that setbacks are temporary, but the lessons from setbacks are permanent. The failure ends, but the wisdom gained from the failure lasts forever. The defeat concludes, but the strength built through the defeat continues indefinitely. The obstacle disappears, but the problem-solving skills developed to overcome the obstacle remain permanently available. This long-term perspective helps you endure short-term pain. When you're in the middle of a setback, it's hard to see the value. It's hard to find the lesson. It's hard to appreciate the growth opportunity. But if you maintain the perspective that this temporary pain is creating permanent gain, you can endure what you need to endure to extract what you need to extract. Setbacks also build character in ways that easy success never could. They teach you perseverance. They develop resilience. They create humility. They build empathy. They force creativity. They demand resourcefulness. They require courage. They develop patience. These character qualities are more valuable than any external achievement, and they can only be built through the experience of setbacks. The people who become truly unstoppable aren't people who never get knocked down. They're people who get up every time they get knocked down. They're people who get knocked down 7 times and get up 8 times. They're people who understand that being knocked down is part of the process, but staying down is a choice. They're people who use every setback as setup for a stronger comeback. Practice seeing setbacks as opportunities instead of obstacles. When something doesn't go according to plan, ask yourself, what opportunity does this create? When you face an unexpected challenge, ask yourself, what strength will overcoming this build? When you experience a failure, ask yourself, what will this teach me that success couldn't teach me? This practice trains your mind to find value in every setback. Also, practice bouncing back faster from setbacks. Don't spend weeks or months feeling sorry for yourself after a defeat. Feel the disappointment, learn the lesson, make the adjustment, and get back in action. The faster you can recover from setbacks, the more unstoppable you become. The quicker you can extract the value and move forward, the more momentum you maintain. Remember that your setbacks don't define you, but your response to setbacks does define you. You're not defined by how many times you fall. You're defined by how many times you get back up. You're not defined by the severity of your defeats. You're defined by the strength of your comebacks. You're not defined by your temporary failures. You're defined by your permanent resilience. Every setback is testing your commitment to your goals. Every failure is asking whether you really want what you say you want. Every obstacle is questioning whether you're willing to do what it takes to overcome it. Every defeat is challenging whether you have the character to keep fighting. These tests separate the committed from the curious, the persistent from the passionate, the unstoppable from the easily stopped. Become the person who passes these tests. Become the person who uses every setback as fuel for comeback. Become the person who gets stronger through adversity instead of weaker. Become the person who treats every failure as education and every obstacle as opportunity. This is how you become unstoppable, not by avoiding setbacks, but by transforming setbacks into strength. Chapter 13. Forge an unbreakable mindset by refusing to be a victim of circumstances. You are not a victim of your circumstances. You are a product of your choices. Your life is not determined by what happens to you. Your life is determined by how you respond to what happens to you. Your future is not controlled by your past. Your future is controlled by your present decisions. Your success is not dependent on perfect conditions. Your success is dependent on your ability to create progress despite imperfect conditions. This isn't motivational theory. This is mathematical reality. Every day, you make thousands of choices, small choices and big choices, conscious choices and unconscious choices, active choices and passive choices. And the accumulation of these choices creates the trajectory of your life. Not your circumstances, not your background, not your advantages or disadvantages, your choices, your responses, your decisions. But most people live as victims of their circumstances. They blame their past for their present. They blame their environment for their performance. They blame other people for their problems. They blame external factors for internal weaknesses. They give away their power by making everything outside of themselves responsible for everything inside of themselves. And as long as they maintain this victim mindset, they remain powerless to change their situation. Victim thinking is seductive because it removes responsibility. It's easier to blame circumstances than to change behavior. It's more comfortable to point fingers than to take action. It's less demanding to make excuses than to make progress. It's simpler to complain about conditions than to create solutions. But this comfort comes at a massive cost. The cost of your power, the cost of your potential, the cost of your future. When you choose victim thinking, you choose powerlessness. You hand control of your life to forces outside yourself. You make your happiness dependent on other people's behavior. You make your success dependent on external conditions. You make your growth dependent on perfect circumstances. This guarantees frustration because you can't control other people, external conditions, or perfect circumstances. You can only control yourself. But when you refuse victim thinking, you reclaim your power. You take control of your life back from external forces. You make your happiness dependent on your own choices. You make your success dependent on your own efforts. You make your growth dependent on your own decisions. This guarantees progress because you can always control your choices, your efforts, and your decisions, regardless of external circumstances. An unbreakable mindset is built on this foundation of personal responsibility. It's built on the understanding that you are the author of your life story, not a character in someone else's story. It's built on the belief that you have the power to influence your outcomes, regardless of your starting point. It's built on the conviction that your choices matter more than your circumstances. This doesn't mean circumstances don't matter. Some people start with advantages. Some people face genuine hardships. Some people encounter unfair treatment. Some people deal with difficult conditions. These realities are real, but they're not determinative. They influence your journey, but they don't determine your destination. They affect your path, but they don't control your potential. History is full of people who overcame terrible circumstances through powerful choices, people who refused to be limited by their limitations, people who refused to be defined by their disadvantages, people who refused to be victims of their situations. These people didn't have perfect conditions. They had unbreakable mindsets. They didn't have ideal circumstances. They had exceptional responses to challenging circumstances. Start by taking inventory of your victim thinking. Where do you blame external factors for internal results? Where do you make other people responsible for your emotions? Where do you make circumstances responsible for your choices? Where do you make your past responsible for your present? Where do you make your environment responsible for your performance? This awareness is the first step to breaking free from victim thinking. Then practice taking responsibility for your responses. Even when you're not responsible for the circumstances. You didn't choose to be hurt, but you can choose how to heal. You didn't choose the challenge, but you can choose how to meet it. You didn't choose the setback, but you can choose how to respond to it. You didn't choose the unfairness, but you can choose how to rise above it. This is where your power lives, in your response, in your choice, in your decision. An unbreakable mindset doesn't deny difficult realities. It refuses to be defined by difficult realities. It acknowledges challenges without being defeated by challenges. It recognizes obstacles without being stopped by obstacles. It sees problems without being paralyzed by problems. It faces hardships without being weakened by hardships. This mindset transforms you from a victim of circumstances to a victor over circumstances. Practice asking empowering questions instead of disempowering questions. Instead of, "Why is this happening to me?" ask, "What can I learn from this?" Instead of, "Who's to blame for this?" ask, "What can I control in this?" Instead of, "How is this unfair?" ask, "How can I respond powerfully?" Instead of, "What's wrong with this situation?" ask, "What opportunity does this create?" These questions shift you from victim thinking to victor thinking. Also, practice focusing on your sphere of influence instead of your sphere of concern. Your sphere of concern includes everything that worries you, bothers you, or affects you. Your sphere of influence includes everything you can actually control or impact. Victim thinking focuses on the sphere of concern. Victor thinking focuses on the sphere of influence. The more you focus on what you can control, the more control you actually develop. Remember that taking responsibility for your responses doesn't mean taking blame for your circumstances. You're not responsible for everything that happens to you, but you are responsible for what you do with everything that happens to you. You're not at fault for every challenge you face, but you are accountable for how you face every challenge. You're not to blame for every problem in your life, but you are responsible for every solution you create. This distinction is crucial because it prevents both victim thinking and self-blame. You're not a victim of forces beyond your control, but you're also not to blame for forces beyond your control. You're simply a person with the power to choose your response to whatever circumstances arise. This power is available to you regardless of your background, your resources, or your situation. An unbreakable mindset is also built on the understanding that difficult circumstances often create extraordinary opportunities. The biggest breakthroughs often come from the biggest breakdowns. The greatest strengths often develop from the greatest struggles. The most valuable lessons often come from the most painful experiences. The most significant growth often results from the most challenging circumstances. This perspective transforms your relationship with difficulty. Instead of avoiding challenging circumstances, you start looking for the opportunities that challenging circumstances create. Instead of being weakened by difficult situations, you start being strengthened by them. Instead of being victimized by tough conditions, you start being developed by them. This shift from victim to victor changes everything. Your circumstances don't determine your destiny, but your responses to your circumstances do determine your destiny. Your past doesn't control your future, but your present choices do control your future. Your environment doesn't define your potential, but your effort does define your potential. Refuse to be a victim of anything. Choose to be a victor over everything. This is how you forge an unbreakable mindset that can't be broken by any external force. Chapter 14. Build lasting mental strength by making your actions louder than your excuses. Actions speak louder than words, but they speak even louder than excuses. Every excuse you make is noise that drowns out the sound of progress. Every justification you create is static that interferes with the signal of growth. Every rationalization you construct is distraction that pulls attention away from what actually needs to be done. But every action you take cuts through the noise. Every step you take creates clear signal. Every move you make generates undeniable momentum. Most people's excuses are louder than their actions. They can spend an hour explaining why they can't do something, and 2 minutes actually trying to do it. They can generate endless reasons why something won't work and minimal effort toward making it work. They can create elaborate justifications for inaction and simple explanations for action. This imbalance guarantees that their lives are shaped more by their limitations than by their capabilities. But some people's actions are louder than their excuses. They spend more energy doing than explaining. They invest more time in solutions than in problems. They dedicate more focus to progress than to justifications. They allocate more resources to building than to defending. This imbalance guarantees that their lives are shaped more by their capabilities than by their limitations. The volume difference between your actions and your excuses determines the direction of your life. When your excuses are louder, you move backward or stay stuck. When your actions are louder, you move forward and build momentum. When your excuses and actions are equally loud, you move in circles and waste energy. The goal is to make your actions so loud that your excuses become inaudible, so consistent that excuses become irrelevant, so powerful that excuses become impossible. Every action you take is a vote for the kind of person you're becoming. Every step you take is evidence of your commitment to growth. Every move you make is proof of your dedication to progress. Every effort you invest is confirmation of your belief in your potential. And this evidence accumulates. It builds confidence. It creates momentum. It develops the kind of mental strength that doesn't need external validation because it has internal proof. But every excuse you make is a vote for the kind of person you're avoiding becoming. Every justification you create is evidence of your commitment to limitation. Every rationalization you construct is proof of your dedication to staying the same. Every explanation you generate is confirmation of your belief in your restrictions. And this evidence also accumulates. It builds doubt. It creates stagnation. It develops the kind of mental weakness that constantly needs external validation because it lacks internal proof. The people who build lasting mental strength aren't people who never feel like making excuses. They feel like making excuses constantly. The difference is they don't act on that feeling. They don't give voice to that impulse. They don't feed energy to that inclination. Instead, they channel that energy into action. They convert excuse-making energy into progress-making energy. They transform justification impulses into achievement impulses. This transformation requires conscious choice. When you feel the urge to explain why something can't be done, choose to explore how it can be done. When you feel the impulse to justify inaction, choose to take action. When you feel the inclination to rationalize limitations, choose to test boundaries. When you feel the desire to make excuses, choose to make progress. This choice builds mental muscle that gets stronger with every use. Start by monitoring the balance between your actions and your excuses. Are you spending more time doing or explaining? Are you investing more energy in progress or in justifications? Are you dedicating more focus to solutions or to problems? Are you allocating more resources to building or to defending? This honest assessment reveals whether your actions or your excuses are currently louder in your life. If your excuses are currently louder, don't get discouraged. Get determined. Every person who has built lasting mental strength started with loud excuses and quiet actions. The key is gradually shifting the volume balance, slowly making your actions louder and your excuses quieter, progressively increasing your doing and decreasing your explaining, consistently expanding your effort and contracting your justifications. This shift happens through daily practice. Every day, you have multiple opportunities to choose action over excuses. When you wake up and don't feel like exercising, you can exercise anyway. When you face a difficult task and want to procrastinate, you can start anyway. When you encounter a challenge and feel like complaining, you can problem solve anyway. Each of these choices makes your actions a little louder and your excuses a little quieter. Also practice catching your excuses before they become loud. Notice the moment when your mind starts generating justifications for inaction. Recognize the instant when your brain begins creating explanations for limitation. Identify the second when your thoughts start constructing reasons for delay. This early awareness allows you to redirect that mental energy into action, instead of allowing it to build into excuse-making momentum. Remember that excuses are often disguised as reasonable explanations. They don't always sound like whining or complaining. Sometimes they sound logical. Sometimes they seem practical. Sometimes they appear wise. But if they're preventing action instead of promoting action, they're still excuses. If they're encouraging limitation instead of expansion, they're still justifications. If they're supporting inaction instead of progress, they're still rationalizations. The most dangerous excuses are the ones that sound reasonable. I don't have enough time sounds reasonable until you examine how you're currently spending your time. I don't have enough money sounds logical until you analyze what you're currently spending your money on. I'm not ready yet sounds practical until you consider whether anyone is ever fully ready before they start. It's too difficult sounds wise until you realize that difficulty is what creates strength. Challenge your reasonable-sounding excuses with unreasonable-sounding questions. What if time wasn't the real issue? What if money wasn't the real barrier? What if readiness wasn't required for starting? What if difficulty was exactly what you needed? These questions often reveal that your reasonable excuses are actually unreasonable limitations disguised as practical considerations. Actions don't have to be perfect to be louder than excuses. They just have to be consistent. Small daily actions create more noise than big occasional excuses. Regular, modest efforts generate more volume than sporadic, elaborate justifications. Persistent, minor progress makes more sound than intermittent, major explanations. Consistency beats intensity when it comes to making your actions louder than your excuses. The people who achieve extraordinary things don't have extraordinary excuses. They have ordinary challenges but extraordinary responses to those challenges. They face the same obstacles but create different outcomes. They encounter the same difficulties but generate different results. The difference isn't in their circumstances. The difference is in their ratio of actions to excuses. Their actions are consistently louder than their limitations. Make this your new standard. Make your actions so loud that your excuses become whispers. Make your progress so obvious that your justifications become irrelevant. Make your movement so consistent that your explanations become unnecessary. This is how you build lasting mental strength. Not through perfect actions, but through persistent actions. Not through the absence of excuses, but through the dominance of effort over explanation. Your life will be shaped by whichever is louder. Your actions or your excuses. Choose to make your actions deafening and your excuses silent. Choose to make your effort obvious and your justifications invisible. Choose to make your progress undeniable and your limitations questionable. This is how mental strength becomes lasting, through actions that speak louder than any excuse ever could. Chapter 15. Lock in your mental strength by committing to never stop growing. Mental strength is not a destination you reach. It's a journey you continue. It's not a trophy you win once. It's a practice you maintain daily. It's not a state you achieve permanently. It's a commitment you honor consistently. The moment you think you've built all the mental strength you need is the moment you start losing the mental strength you have. The moment you stop growing is the moment you start shrinking. The moment you stop moving forward is the moment you start moving backward. Growth is not optional for mental strength. It's essential. It's not a luxury for those who have extra time. It's a necessity for those who want to stay strong. It's not something you do when everything else is handled. It's something you do to handle everything else. Mental strength that isn't growing is mental strength that's dying. Character that isn't developing is character that's deteriorating. Resilience that isn't expanding is resilience that's contracting. Most people think mental strength is built once and then maintained automatically. They believe that if they develop discipline, they'll always be disciplined. They assume that if they build character, they'll always have character. They expect that if they create resilience, they'll always be resilient. But mental strength doesn't work like physical objects. It works like physical fitness. It requires ongoing maintenance. It demands consistent investment. It needs regular renewal. Just as physical fitness deteriorates without regular exercise, mental strength deteriorates without regular challenge. Just as physical muscles atrophy without consistent use, mental muscles atrophy without consistent testing. Just as physical endurance decreases without ongoing training, mental endurance decreases without ongoing stretching. This is why the strongest people never stop training. They never stop challenging themselves. They never stop growing. The people who maintain extraordinary mental strength throughout their lives aren't people who built it once and then coasted. They're people who rebuild it daily. They're people who challenge it regularly. They're people who expand it continuously. They understand that mental strength is like a muscle that requires daily exercise, not like a diploma that you earn once and keep forever. This means you must commit to lifelong growth, not growth until you reach a certain level, not growth until you achieve certain goals, not growth until you feel strong enough. Lifelong growth, continuous growth, never-ending growth, growth that continues regardless of your age, your achievements, your circumstances, or your feelings. Growth that becomes as natural and necessary as breathing. Lifelong growth requires deliberate practice. You can't just hope you'll keep growing. You can't just assume growth will happen automatically. You have to plan for growth. You have to schedule growth. You have to prioritize growth. You have to protect growth. You have to invest in growth. Growth happens through intention, not through accident. Start by committing to learn something new regularly. Not just information, new skills, new perspectives, new capabilities, new ways of thinking, new methods of problem solving, new approaches to challenges. Learning keeps your mind flexible. It prevents mental rigidity. It maintains mental agility. It ensures that your mental strength stays dynamic instead of becoming static. Also, commit to taking on new challenges regularly. Challenges that stretch your current capabilities. Challenges that require growth to overcome. Challenges that push you beyond your comfort zone. Challenges that demand more than you've given before. These challenges are your mental gym. There where you build new strength. There where you expand existing strength. There where you test developing strength. Without new challenges, your mental strength plateaus. It reaches a certain level and stays there. It becomes adequate for current demands but insufficient for future demands. It becomes suitable for known situations but inadequate for unknown situations. It becomes strong enough for yesterday's challenges, but too weak for tomorrow's opportunities. This is why you must continuously seek challenges that exceed your current capabilities. Remember that growth is uncomfortable. It's supposed to be uncomfortable. Comfort is the enemy of growth. If you're always comfortable, you're not growing. If you're never challenged, you're not expanding. If you're constantly in your comfort zone, you're slowly shrinking. Discomfort is the price of growth. Uncertainty is the cost of expansion. Challenge is the investment required for strength. Embrace this discomfort as evidence that you're growing. When you feel stretched, celebrate it. When you feel challenged, welcome it. When you feel uncertain, appreciate it. These feelings mean you're moving beyond your current limitations. These sensations indicate you're expanding your capabilities. These experiences confirm you're building new strength. Also commit to regular self-examination. Growth requires awareness of where you are and where you need to go. You can't grow in areas you don't acknowledge need growth. You can't improve aspects of yourself you don't recognize need improvement. You can't strengthen character traits you don't admit need strengthening. Regular self-examination reveals growth opportunities that might otherwise remain hidden. Ask yourself challenging questions regularly. Where am I getting complacent? Where am I avoiding growth? Where am I choosing comfort over challenge? Where am I limiting myself unnecessarily? Where am I making excuses instead of making progress? Where am I settling instead of striving? These questions identify areas where growth is needed most. Surround yourself with people who challenge you to grow. People who see your potential even when you don't. People who expect more from you than you expect from yourself. People who won't let you settle for less than your best. People who push you beyond your comfort zone. People who believe in your ability to grow. These relationships are catalysts for continuous growth. Avoid people who encourage you to stay the same. People who are comfortable with your limitations. People who benefit from your weakness. People who feel threatened by your growth. People who discourage your expansion. People who reinforce your excuses. These relationships are barriers to continuous growth. They create pressure to maintain status quo instead of pressure to pursue growth. Make growth your lifestyle, not your goal. Goals have endpoints. Lifestyles are ongoing. Goals can be achieved and abandoned. Lifestyles are maintained indefinitely. Goals create temporary motivation. Lifestyles create permanent transformation. When growth becomes your lifestyle, you never stop expanding your mental strength. You never stop developing your character. You never stop building your resilience. This commitment to never stop growing is what locks in your mental strength. It ensures that your strength continues building instead of starting to deteriorate. It guarantees that your character keeps developing instead of beginning to decline. It confirms that your resilience stays expanding instead of starting to contract. This is how mental strength becomes permanent. Through permanent commitment to growth. Remember, you're either growing or dying. You're either expanding or contracting. You're either moving forward or moving backward. There is no standing still. There is no maintaining current levels indefinitely. There is only growth or decay. Choose growth. Commit to growth. Live growth. Make growth your non-negotiable commitment for as long as you live. This is how you build mental strength that lasts. This is how you create character that endures. This is how you develop resilience that never breaks. Not through achieving a certain level of strength, but through committing to never stop building strength. Not through reaching a final destination, but through embracing an endless journey. Not through becoming strong enough, but through becoming committed to always becoming stronger.